Hey guys, Peter here to do an album review. Today I'm here to tell you about the debut record from Capra, In Transmission, out April 23rd on Metal Blade Records. This album has 11 tracks, 32 minutes in length, and they are an American hardcore punk band. Now, if there's a word to describe this record, I would go with consistency. You're going to see it in the structure, you're going to see it in the soundscape, and you're going to see it in the results of that soundscape. Now, when you look at the structure of the album, this is a very volatile record. It moves in a lot of different ways within the songs and obviously from song to song. Having said that, it doesn't give you this sense of break and restart with every single track. Normally, albums that have this sort of dynamic mechanisms that are very volatile, that move all over the place, seem to feel, at least to me, a little bit broken, a little bit disconnected from track to track. This one doesn't offer you that because it has a different approach. It connects the tracks in an absolute seamless way. The moment you press play until the time the record finishes, you almost feel like you're listening to one continuous song because you're kind of listening to a monologue. That's how the album is put together. This is all about listening and not necessarily answering back. And because you don't have a chance to answer back, the fluidity of the album is unimpacted. You have no time to go up for air. You have no time to leave what you're listening to. You're being told something and you have to sit down and listen to it until the person that's telling you that is finished. That's exactly the feeling of this record. That's how it comes across, that's how it's structured, that's how it's delivered. Now, when you get into the soundscape, the same thing is true to a certain extent. There's a lot of consistency in it. That doesn't mean the album is repetitive at all, because it's not the case. The volatility that the record has in the soundscape allows the album to change the directions, to change the eyesight of the listener, and give you different feels and different looks at every single turn within the songs and from track to track. The consistency is in terms of the output. The same style, or at least the same sound approach, stays very well connected across the whole album. So the intensity could change. You could have a song that's a lot more intense, one that's a lot less, or one that kind of mediates between the two. But how it comes across as far as the sound quality is concerned stays consistent across every single track. So a lot of things are happening with the sound, a lot of things are happening with the emotions that sound carry and that they put forward, but the quality of approach stays consistent across all 11 songs. Within the sound, there are two elements that drive the experience: the drums and the guitars. In my opinion, the drums are the weakest point on the record. I'm not a fan of how they sound. I felt like they were a little bit flat at times, and they don't really offer a little bit of grounding to the overall experience of the album. And this is an album that sometimes starts to levitate, it starts to run away from the listener. So having one element that would ground the sound a little bit more, that would create a little bit more of a foundation for everything else, I feel like it could really make a huge improvement on the overall playability, but more so on the overall experience that the album would offer to the listener. On the other side, you have the guitars. The guitars are very dynamic. I almost felt like the volatility of the record is really defined by the volatility of the guitar sound and the approach that they took. Sometimes a little bit more driven, sometimes a little bit more chunky, and this really dictates the intensity that the tracks have, the direction of the songs, and where the track is going to go at the end, and overall how you feel towards the record. I love the guitar sound, I love the approach, I love the grittiness that it has. It feels very raw, it feels very natural, it feels very organic. The whole album has that organic sense to it. It almost sounds like a jam session recorded in one take, and that to me is something that stayed consistent throughout the whole record, regardless of the volatility, regardless of the style, regardless of the approach, and regardless of what you're getting out of each and every single song. Outside of that, you have to talk about the vocals. I found that Crow Lotus is absolutely phenomenal. Best person for an album like this. She has an incredible voice, she has an incredible delivery, and she delivers it with intensity. And all she does really is change the degrees of intensity that she has within the tracks and from track to track. But I don't think that intensity ever goes away. It feels like it's in your face. It feels like she's talking to you, like she's really close to you, and she's not taking anything back, and she's not holding back at all on anything that she has to say. So that emotion, that drive, that presence really carries forward and really carries the album. I don't think it's a consistent necessarily approach throughout the whole record. It feels that way, but she just changes enough of her intensity, enough of her delivery to make the album have some ebbs and flows as far as the vocal drive is concerned. So it gives you one perception, but underneath it, it's a lot more volatile than when it comes across. Overall, this is a very interesting debut record. It has a lot of great qualities to it. I really like the vocals, I like how the guitars sound, I like the overall presence of the album. Perhaps the thing that I like the most about this record is how it's constructed, the structure that it has, and then obviously the outcome that it puts forward, a very intense, a very abrupt, sometimes in-your-face raw output. So I love all of these elements. Like I said, the only thing that I would like better as far as the record is concerned is a little bit more grounding on the drums, a little bit more substance, a little bit more oomph, if you will, allowing the sound to have a bigger impact overall and not feel as driven, as light, or as flat at times as it does. Now, as far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Medusa, a very driven song with bursts and dips. It just peaks and valleys constantly. It is a track that's moving. It feels like it's always moving all over the place, even though it does it in a very subtle kind of way. It moves from one to the other. By the time you realize the song has taken a dip, you're already in that dip. By the time you realize the song has a peak, you're already in it. So it doesn't really, it doesn't give you a glimpse of what's coming ahead. It just allows you to transition into it with the greatest of eases, and that makes the song feel a little bit more dynamic, feel a little bit more fluid. It expands and contracts at the same time as far as the sound and intensity is concerned, and I really felt like those two were intertwined. When the song increases in intensity, the sound also becomes bigger. When the song decreases in intensity, the sound also decreases in volume. So I really felt like those two elements were intertwined. At the midpoint, the song changes direction. It changes approach. It becomes a little bit chuggier. It becomes a little bit more methodic. And then at the end, it goes back to how it started. So it's almost like a sandwich where you have two pieces of bread, one on each end, that sound very similar, that come across with a very similar execution. And in the middle, you have something a little bit thicker, a little bit harder to digest, a little bit more methodic. That's the design and that's the delivery that Medusa has in store for the listener. Next, Paper Tongues, a track that grows, drops, and then rolls over. It just has a lot of things happening to it, and it's hard for you to find a linear path within it. Even though it's there, sometimes it's hard to define it because of all the changes and all the volatility that are present in the song, making it a little bit unbalanced overall, because you're just never really sure in which way you're going with it. It feels also emotionally unbalanced. Perhaps you get that as a reflection of the lyrical content and the vocal delivery. I felt the two elements really created that more emotional unbalance, like you feel like you're right on the edge of losing it as you progress through this song, and it never really goes away. It's a very bouncy track musically, and it's a song that keeps you on the edge of your seat emotionally as far as the lyrics and vocals are concerned. Last but not least, Deadbeat Assailant, my favorite track on the album. Very direct opening as the track starts. It really pushes the song forward, if you will. Then it starts to drop, it changes directions a little bit, and it loses a slight loss of intensity. And this allows the guitars to take overall control of the sound, of how the song is put together, and what drives the track forward. Overall, is a song that I felt very consistent as far as the vocals are concerned. That's perhaps one of the main elements that really doesn't change from the start all the way to the end, and allows the song to feel different but still stay very grounded, very connected, and not lose itself within itself. Like I said, my favorite song on the album because it's a powerful track, musically, vocally, and lyrically. It just has all three components pushing in the same direction with the same intent and with the same intensity. I just love this track. This is it, guys. This is Capra with In Transmission, out April 23rd on Metal Blade Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.